another episode of Well-Adjusted Mama. This is a podcast dedicated to educating and empowering women from preconception, pregnancy, birth, and through early motherhood on wellness lifestyle. I'm your host, Dr. Laura Brayton, and I'm a maternity pediatric chiropractor as well as mother who has hand-selected experts in natural holistic healthcare specialties to shine light on options and choices during this exciting phase of a woman's life. And today I have the honor of interviewing Melisa Keenan, and we speak on the topic of understanding masculine and feminine energy in personal and professional life. Keynote speaker and international and USA Today bestselling author, Melisa Keenan is the go-to intuitive intimacy expert for the top 1%. She helps business owners have more confidence, connection, ease, and trust in their personal relationships through mastery of intimacy and masculine and feminine energy. More than just a 4-year coach or a certified master of the Gibson-Banning method, Melisa is a true expert on healing broken and strained relationships, starting with her own. Having overcome separation from her husband and the hurt of betrayal and ultimately rebuild and repair their marriage, Melisa now has supported women, men, and couples to feel seen, heard, cherished, appreciated, and fully self-expressed in their relationships while expanding their business. When she is not in the middle of everyone's private lives, you will find her dancing, singing, working, and praying at her hobby ranch in northern Nevada, where she lives with her husband, CJ, and their 4 children. For more information, check out her website at melisakeenan.com, or you can find her on all the socials at Melisa Keenan. Hi, Melisa. Welcome to the show. I'm very excited to have you on today.
Thank you. Me too.
So today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, but something that I haven't really covered often in Well-Adjusted Mama, and that's the topic of understanding masculine and feminine energy. We can talk a little bit about how that pertains in your personal life with your intimate partner, as well as other relationships in your personal life. And we can dabble possibly a little bit into how that impacts professionally as well. We have a lot of professional mamas that are listening on as well. And masculine and feminine impact every area of our life, right? So I'm very excited to learn more about this topic from you as the expert. So tell me, what makes you an expert in masculine and feminine energies?
Oh, you know what? It's the school of hard knocks that makes me the most an expert in masculine and feminine energy. I lived out of balance in, I don't even like to use that verbiage, but I lived heavily in masculine energy, leading with masculine energy for the majority of my life. And when I finally realized that that was the case, my marriage was in shambles. My husband and I were literally separated, and my life was miserable. I felt like no matter what I tried to control or manage in my life, the more I opened my heart to marriage and having children and all the things that you can't control, the more I felt like I couldn't handle the pressure. I really felt like I couldn't do life, like something was inherently wrong with me. And so when I came to this realization, it was met with a lot of resistance, but it was also like a saving grace in a way. At first, I thought masculine and feminine energy was trying to put me into just another box as a woman, just another like set of checklist things that I needed to do or be or have in order to be enough. And the more that I studied it, the more I realized it actually was an invitation for parts of myself that I had thought I had to shove away. So going through that journey on my own, plus lots of certifications and trainings and et cetera, has led me to where I am today.
I love that. So I kind of was first introduced to this concept, almost 20 years ago. And a friend of mine, I was single. I was like looking for my husband, right? And she's like, "You got to read Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus," and John Gray's work. And she was really very passionate about that work. And the book really breaks it down, and really I think is like a very basic version and introductory to what that even means, and understanding, to your point, as a woman, if I'm feminine at my core, which I am, but I am leading from a masculine perspective, that is not going to serve me in attracting my intimate partner, right? So you attract either, typically feminine men, and then you get turned off because you're like, oh, I'm feminine and you're feminine, and that's not magnetizing. Or if a masculine man does happen to hang out for a bit, he gets turned off because he's like, you're too masculine. And, and this is also very unconscious, right? Nobody's saying that to each other. It's very unconscious, but there is energies, and intimate relationships in particular need energetic attraction to keep the relationship alive and well. So I think that was really interesting. And then I remember going to a Tony Robbins event a couple years after that, reading that book, and he talked a lot about that as well. And for me, understanding why was I leading with my masculine? I wanted to know why, and I was like, oh, this was me as a little girl wanting to connect with my father. That relationship was more important to me than any other relationship in my life. And my father was masculine. So I was like modeling, that was me like, okay, if I'm masculine, I'm worthy of my father's love. Right. So these are all things that we pick up those first 7 years of our life, but they do stay with us into adulthood. Right. So it's very interesting, and it does impact everything that we do and think and say and attract into our life. So, it's been an interesting journey once having that awareness. So let's talk. Can you talk a little bit more now that you've gone through these certifications about what that means, for example, in an intimate relationship, and understanding also that a woman could be masculine at her nature, right? Or feminine at her nature. So for people listening, how they can understand really what's unique or real for them or authentic for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that it's important to lay a foundation first, if I may, to back up just a little bit and break down what I break down into 3 different definitions of this. I think there's a lot of toxicity, honestly, in this conversation around masculine and feminine energy. And a lot of it can feel like just another box that we're supposed to shove ourselves into when it's not taught well or it's not understood well. So, so thanks, Laura. The first is we need to understand the difference between cultural, energy, and what I call divine. So
divine energy.
Yeah. So first is cultural masculine and feminine, then is masculine and feminine energy, then is divine masculine and feminine. So your cultural masculine and feminine is going to vary by culture. And it really is important for us to look at that and kind of peel that back and strip that away from the more pure versions of what masculine and feminine energy are. Cultural masculine and feminine, for example, we may have images of our mother with a vacuum in her hands always. And so we may think, oh, that's what it means to be a feminine woman, to be a quote unquote good woman. I need to have the house clean all the time, or I need to, some of these more traditional kind of things. Raised in a feminist environment, you may have constantly seen your mother roaring against the patriarchy. And so you may think that's what a good woman does. She is always in competition with men or these sorts of things, which would actually end up being, more masculine energy, but part of our feminine culture. And so really looking at that and examining, that's one of the first things that I do with my clients is we'll sit down and go, what did you believe about what it meant to be a air quotes good woman? What were you conditioned to believe? What did the women in your life model around that? Or what did they model by not doing certain things that you believed now, okay, for example, if your mother abandoned you or was very neglectful, then, you may have opposite things that you built into your belief system. And so asking ourselves that as adult women, so we can determine for ourselves what kind of woman we want to be, and how that's very different from masculine and feminine energy. So when we look at masculine and feminine energy, we're talking about yin and yang. This is a concept or a philosophy that has existed throughout time, literally since the beginning of time. It has, roots in ancient Eastern culture and is a framework around how energy moves and flows, not just in humans, but also in nature and in every system of life. It's a system of like acting and being acted upon. It's a system of, for example, feminine energy might represent being or flow or sensation, emotion, these kinds of things. And masculine energy might represent more the doing side of things, order, structure, forward movement. Masculine energy is more focused on outward or the external and the tangible, and feminine energy is more focused inward or on the subtle or what we can sense, intuition. So this is masculine and feminine energy, and you can see how there's some overlap, and that's why we get confused. Like nails don't have anything to do with feminine energy, but they might have something to do with cultural femininity, and we get to choose about that. But masculine feminine energy is not something that we're necessarily being boxed into, or it's not like a set of shoulds. It's just a system to understand. That's what our masculine feminine energy is. So when I go through my story that I shared before, and it's like I was out of balance, what I saw was that I wasn't allowing much of that yin side of me to flow. I was only allowing the yang side. So just to complete this, the third definition is what I call divine masculine or feminine, or you might call that like your truest nature. And I think that's where you were kind of saying, we might have such and such at our core, masculine or feminine, etc. I don't really use that framework around what's at your core. I more look at what is the truest expression of you, because each of us have yin and yang energies in us. And when we really step into that embodiment of our true nature, we're no longer thinking, am I balanced? Am I in my feminine or my masculine? We're not thinking anymore. It's an embodied experience where we're just being led by our heart and guided in our life. And it looks like a flow, and it will look different in cycles and seasons of masculine energy.
It is a flow. It's not one or the other. It's both.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that having that framework is really important for people because there's so much misconception.
Yes, there is.
When we talk about, going back to your question around how does this affect, new mothers, how does this affect our intimate relationships? I think that kind of already some of the examples that I gave sort of start to illuminate some of this. And a lot of times I see women, especially who have been career focused business women, maybe they waited until, they were in their 30s or even later in their life to have children. And when they have their first child, this almost feels like it's like slapping you upside the head. It almost feels like you're drowning in it because you likely, as a career woman, lived your life primarily with this masculine drive and in a lot of leadership, and it served you very well. And then when you have your child, you almost feel like I have no tools in my toolkit to know what to do with this child. And that affects us in our marriages too, because the reality is relationships and true connection thrive in feminine energy. They just do. It's about those subtleties. We can't like control or organize or like manage our way to being a good mom or to having a connected marriage.
Right. Yeah. It's not so much action oriented, right? It's really just, it's very emotional. It's very intuitive. These are more the feminine qualities. And yeah, mothering requires feminine energy. So does birth, by the way. That is something that comes up often actually in this podcast because we talk a lot about birth. Birth is the most feminine act, I feel like that we can create, right? There's really nothing more feminine than surrendering and opening and birthing your child. So I think it's such great practice. There's a reason birth physiologically occurs the way it does, because it literally, I think, rewires our nervous system to really get to a very strong feminine place, for lack of better words. This is an interesting topic with the verbiage, but anyways, right?
And I really see, and I don't know, I actually don't know where you fall around this, but I had my first at the hospital, and I had my next 3 at home. And I really see our modern culture of medicine trying to masculinize every aspect of birth humanly possible.
And it's just so illogical and unnatural, right? Yeah. I have one son, I birthed at home, and home birth is the epitome of the really such a powerful feminine that's there. It's just so ancestral. It's so, like, this is a feminine person being there at their most feminine, and also extremely powerful. I felt like I was on the top of a mountain after I gave birth. I felt really euphoric. So I think and it was really such a powerful, amazing experience for me. So I think a lot of most women I talk to that have home births have similar experiences. And to your point, when you're birthing in a hospital, there's limitations to tapping into that feminine power.
I remember learning, and I'm not, this is not my field of expertise, but learning about how, they give you in the hospital, what is the name of the medication that will help?
Pitocin.
Yes. Pitocin. Yes, exactly. And it blocks your receptors from doing what they need to in order to release oxytocin, but oxytocin literally is the feminine energy hormone.
It's the love hormone.
Yeah. And which is like everything in you around feminine energy. So I had such a difficult time connecting with my first daughter. It was such a bumpy go, and she had colic, and I'm like, wow, hindsight's, I'm like, that's very interesting. So, but it was also so symbolic of my experience, because again, I was a new mother and I had only employed masculine tools. And so here I was, now also medicine had, also helps thwart my feminine energy. And so connecting with this little human being who now literally felt like my heart was outside of me, running around vulnerable, and I was in charge of protecting her. It was so overwhelming for me, like postpartum depression, very real, very real.
Wow.
And I think it had a lot to do with masculine and feminine energy.
It does. And it also has a lot to do with the type of birth, right? The type of birth experience, which you're discussing. Pitocin is synthetic oxytocin, and any type of synthetic hormone is going to create hormonal imbalance and really an interruption in the normal physiological process of birth and or other, functions in our body. And the same thing I would say with birth control pill and other types of synthetic hormones that women take to avoid pregnancy or address an irregular menstrual cycle. They're masking the symptoms. They are not addressing root cause. And I would also say are impacting being feminine. They're, Kelly Brogan is a heroine of mine, and she speaks a lot about not only synthetic birth control pill and the other synthetic hormones that are used to prevent pregnancy, but also antidepressants for women. It's really numbing us, and it's blocking these normal hormonal cascades, birth or not, right? And that will interrupt being feminine and being really owning our feminine power. And feminine power is not masculine power, right? I think that's the other thing. We think power is always from the masculine, and that is not true. So I think that's very interesting as we think about that and have an awareness with specifically with women in our culture. We're speaking about the US, right? And how there's a conditioning that if you, addictions to food and alcohol and other things to numb, and that numbing, how that can impact us really being at our authentic self. We can't connect with that if we're numbed.
Absolutely. And I think this conversation around oxytocin also is a great lead into where we talked about your intimate relationships, which that is where I know stuff. I'm so glad you explained how the science works about hormones, because I don't know that.
Yeah, but they impact feminine and masculine, so it's relevant to this conversation. So for a new mom listening in who is feeling disconnected from her intimate partner, the father or mother of her child, like what would you recommend to that person who's also dealing with rebalancing their own hormones, right, after giving birth?
Yeah, absolutely. So, oxytocin, I just look at this like from a God perspective, right? We're given oxytocin so that we can bond with our baby, but oxytocin is a bonding love hormone. It shows up also when we orgasm and when we're in extreme states of pleasure, or joy or ecstasy and these sorts of things. And so being able to just invite our partner into those moments of oxytocin is huge. So like when you're breastfeeding and you're feeling that love for your child, like having your partner nearby, having your partner like just touching you or just touching the baby or being a part of those experiences can be so bonding and create intimacy that doesn't have to depend only on physical touch, right?
Right.
Yeah, because it's beautiful to allow our heart to expand enough to encompass like all the things. I used to worry, especially with my second, I really worried while I was pregnant with my second, like what if my love has like a limit or something and I can't like, have everyone in the umbrella. It sounds crazy and silly. And yet I know that it's so relatable because I talk to my friends about it, and what you find is like, no, like love just grows. Like your heart has the capacity to just grow. But it was a decision too. It was a decision not to cut out people, not to cut out my partner, not to cut out, anything that I didn't want out of my bubble. It was a decision to say, I'm going to actually open my heart. Energetically, I'm going to make this decision to allow everybody in, which is just, it's a beautiful experience.
It is. And that sounds like that was also very much a conscious decision that you made to open. And the truth that, there is no limits to love, right? So, but there could be limits to how open we open our hearts. So that's what we have control over. And one thing that does come up often in my practice, and you mentioned this being when you were pregnant with your second child, if there is trauma from the first birth experience and or postpartum mood disorders, right, which are very real, especially for first-time moms, you can kind of bring that baggage of fear into the second pregnancy and birth, and you don't have to. There's tools like hypnotherapy that can actually help you heal from that. And I've seen women who've had the traumatic births, emergency C-sections, go on to have beautiful VBACs that were extremely emotionally healing to them, which is really important, right? So I think that's also good to have that awareness that if you're feeling fear, anxiety because of that experience, which was a real experience, there's things that you can do to release them, which does not mean that you're forgetting the experience. It just means that you don't need to bring that type of energy into the next birth.
I love that.
And it does sound like those 3 following births were very healing for you to be at home versus the experience you had in the hospital with the first.
They really were. Yeah, gosh, my second, there was so much of that trauma healing that needed to take place. And we were kind of crazy. Hindsight, so I'm like, that was very risky. We lived in at a ranch way outside of town on 13 miles of dirt road. So it took 45 minutes to even get to the nearest grocery store, probably about an hour to get to the nearest hospital. And our backup plan, if we needed to transfer to the hospital, would have been helicopter. But I was so irritated and irked by the lack of sacredness that I experienced with my first. I was like, we are inviting a soul into this planet. This did not feel sacred. This felt chaotic and awful and too, I don't know, stuffy. And there was no space for this little soul to go, oh, I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for the welcome. It just did not feel that way. And I was so determined. I look back, I'm like, wow, that was really bold. We could have at least just had the birth at my mother-in-law's house or something. But I was like, nope, we're doing this. And so we did. And
you did it. And your intuition told you that you and the baby were safe to do that, which is very important. And if your intuition tells you otherwise, you follow that thread as well. But I think that these are not always conscious, logical decisions that we make, especially while we're pregnant, especially as new moms. And we don't have to understand the logic. We can let the men do that. We can let them analyze it all day long.
And that was really the beginning, for me of really learning to trust my intuition. It actually came through the birth process because, with my first, thankfully I had a midwife nurse practitioner who came in at the last, 15 minutes and really guided me to my truth. And it was oh my gosh, whatever that was, that's what I want more of. And that's what led me down the journey of understanding more about home births. But it was, I felt very disconnected and very I guess a victim to my own body, to the process, to everything that was happening in my first. And with my second, I was wait a second, where you said it's ancestral, it's I am connected to all this wisdom of women who have come before me, who have done this. There's this innate thing in me. And I think that also translates, what took me years to do was recognize that wisdom that felt like a crown, that I was endowed with this power, that same experience of beingness translates into my marriage. And when, difficulties arise or things show up, it translates there. I can depend on that then too. Also, when trauma shows up and I need to work through something, or I'm self-sabotaging, I can utilize that same power there. And it also shows up as a business owner or leader in the world with whatever way we're called to lead and influence it, as a mother, etc. It shows up in all those places, and we can utilize it or we can forget, which is what happens to most of us, right? We just walk around, we forget who we are, we forget what power we have to just easily drop into and tap into. We just forget.
Right. But it is there with us. And I love how you worded that wisdom, because there is a wisdom that has been with all the women in our genealogy for generations and generations. And it's in us too. We don't have to, especially I want to speak to the first time moms out there who have not yet given birth. You have given birth, maybe not in this lifetime, but the knowingness of how to birth is there within you. and all the women that have gone before you have given birth. It's just literally shared information. The process of birth has not changed. If we look at an unmedicated natural birth, that we have not evolved the way that we birth babies since humans have given birth, right? Like it is literally so old. And there's a reason why there hasn't been a need to essentially upgrade our it's because it's just perfect the way it is. And when we interfere with the process, that's where we can see issues and challenges come up. Whether it's an external intervention, like within the hospital with medications and rules and guidelines to follow, or also an internal sabotage, right? Which we also can see happening of a woman saying, is my body able to do this? Am I good enough? Is it going to hurt? I'm afraid. All of these things that creep up during the labor process. So I think going into that, really recognizing the mental part of birth is really important too. Do you have anything to speak about that?
Well, I kind of, as I shared before about, recognizing the difference between masculine and feminine energy versus cultural masculine and feminine, like a huge part of the work that I do, helping people align and uncover their divine nature through their masculine and feminine energy is around peeling back what society has given us that's not even ours. And so when you talk about, that self-sabotaging piece, one of the most empowering things we can do is begin to recognize what voices are in our head that aren't even ours. Like when a woman feels this kind of scarcity and fear around birth, that's not hers. That's been handed down now for a few generations about how incapable she is and how she should never trust herself or her own body and how she's not the authority over her body and she's not the authority over her emotions. And then when she has the baby, she's not the authority as the mother. She should go to the pediatrician who's the authority for her child. Like it is insanity. And so I do a lot of work, and I'm doing this constantly in my own self because we have so many messages from society just bombarding us about how we're incapable. And all of that's not actually our own voice. Like there's a voice that's our true voice that's deep, deep in there that knows we can do this birth. We can do this mothering thing. I mean, that's the age old conversation around like, where's the manual that came with this child? Like the manual is in us. And it took me years of like peeling back these really truly masculine layers because, we've lived in a patriarchal society, peeling back these masculine layers before I was like, oh, and I actually remember where I was standing. I had just had my third child. I had just asked my husband to move out because of certain actions that he was constantly engaged in that were not okay with me. And I was standing alone, like feeling like pretty, I don't know what is happening with my life. I have 3 kids in diapers and this is extremely difficult. And I don't really know what my future holds. And yet I looked down at my babies and I remember just feeling the mantle, like finally, I know I am a capable mother. And I just looked at my babies like it was like my crowning ceremony. I can't even tell you, I was in the kitchen barefooted. And it was just like, oh, wait a second. All these voices I've believed about how I'm not enough for this. Like I'm actually perfect for this. There's no one better than me to be these children, specifically be their mother.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes. This has come up in other episodes where you mentioned, we're bringing a soul into the earth, right? That's what pregnancy and birth does. And around 4 months gestation is when literally the baby chooses the parents which little fetal body doesn't want to inhabit. And it's choosing its path. It's choosing that lifetime with, knowing the parents play such a huge role in shaping that soul's life. And so I really think that's a beautiful thing where you can really recognize that your child picked you for a reason. And there's a lot of lessons that they have to teach us, right? And vice versa. So, I think when we kind of think about that, that's pretty intense to think about these little souls being like, that's who I want, this is the ride that we're getting ready to go on. How amazing is that? And you're right. There's no one more capable to mother your child than yourself.
Yep. And that knowledge has come through some actually really intense trials that I have gone through with my own mother.
Oh, yes.
Who has been extremely neglectful most of my life. Actually, I would say she's more available to me now as an adult than she ever has been, despite the fact that she still has a lot of mental health issues and addiction challenges. And so much of my life, I was raised by her until I was 11. And then my dad won custody of me. And then my dad died of cancer, like 4 months after he won custody of me. So I moved in with my aunt and uncle. Yeah. And it was so challenging and painful, and tried to live with my mom one additional time after moving in with my aunt and uncle. And it didn't work out. It blew up. And actually you can, if you want to know more about the details of that story and like kind of the miracles that happened with that, I wrote about that in my first book, The Younger Self Letters. So it's, I'm just one contributor in a multi-author book, but I wrote that whole story there. Anyways, I think that it's pertinent, I guess, that this comes up because I know that every child I've had, mommy issues show up. Like we get to go, oh yeah, that's there. And that was hard, and that was challenging. And for me, stepping more into a space of beingness and releasing some of the masculine energy strategies that I lived by allowed me access to my spiritual gifts and to the ability to really kind of understand the ununderstandable, if that makes sense. Like those deeper questions of like, why me? Why this about our trials in our life? And, of course, this with my mother was definitely one of those, like, why this mother? And I have received like visions about, it's hard to talk about it without getting emotional, but about how perfect she has been for me and how in all her weaknesses, it has allowed me to find parts of myself that were absolutely perfect. Like in her neglect, I found a connection to God. In her, even in her darkness, I have found strengths that now I can embody. And one day, the last vision that I had around this with her and like kind of download and understanding was that actually our spirits, like she's the shiny one. In my lineage, I'm the chain breaker, and I'm the one that like, I'm a coach. I'm the one out there, influencing people. I'm the one that will have lots of people at my funeral saying, thank you for how much you helped me. Like I get to be the shiny one. And my mom is actually the hero. She was born into a home. She was molested by her father until she was 14. She chose into these like difficulties and challenges like a friggin' warrior, and her spirit, that's who she really is. Right. So, gosh, like I just can't emphasize enough how allowing these parts of myself have come forward. Like it has given me access to truths and beauty and a peace that I didn't think was possible.
Wow. It's beautiful. Your mother chose her path, and we've all chosen our path. That's the bottom line. And I think that it can be so, people can have horrendous things happen to them. And, when we get stuck in the victim and the why me, then we really lose the gift of those trials. But I have, a similar story with my mother. And, there's a lot of blessings when you have a mother with mental illness. And I think that's certainly, I can speak for myself. There was also a reason why I was, masculine and essentially kind of masculine, but mothering as well at the same time, my younger sister, you know what I mean? So it's very strange, the survival. There's a survival that comes up. And as a child, I think we only know how to survive in a masculine way. So, but as adult women, we can choose differently. So what a blessing. What a blessing all of this is. And the more we are aware of it and conscious and can be grateful, I think it really unlocks a lot of magic.
It's so true. And that hasn't, it doesn't come without difficulty, and there's still boundaries in place, and there's been many hours of therapy around this relationship. But we really can find peace, and it feels like not just peace. It's like there's the other side of peace too. There's like I'm suffering, I'm going through hard things, and then I find peace. And like, it almost maybe like, okay, there's an acceptance, but it's not really better. I feel like the other side of really embracing who we are as women is a power, like a magic, like we are the sorceress, and we get to experience that when it comes to birth, but in every other aspect of our lives, like I said, we forget, like, wait a second, I am the sorceress. And so this last year, my mom and I had the most healing experience we've ever had together. And she knows I talk about her on these things. She knows I wrote about her, and she often just chooses not to listen or not to read. And
fair enough.
That's fine. Yeah. But we had a really healing experience. And I feel like it would have never happened had I kept my heart closed off. And I have had every reason in the world to just be like, nope, Mom, you've crossed way too many lines. We're just not doing this relationship at all. Like sayonara. But I have chosen not to do that. It didn't feel true to do that in my core. And so as a result, this last November, my mom's birthday is 2 days before mine, but never in our lives. I just turned 35. We have never celebrated our birthdays together. And she was turning 70 and I was turning 35. Well, I'm her only child, and she had me when she was 35. It was like the meridian of time kind of birthday, right? And we planned a trip to New Orleans together for a full week where we were sharing a hotel room. I can't tell you how much anxiety I had around all the different ways this trip could go very, very wrong. And it was so beautiful. We bought dress up clothes and we dressed up like we were from the 1800s. And we walked around town talking to people in Southern accents. It was the most glorious thing I've ever experienced.
That is hilarious. Wow. Well, I will say, I have a preconception program, and a part of that is for women that are, preparing for conception, like in 3 to 6 months. Part of that is working on your relationship with your mother. And you and I might have had a little more intense mother issues, but every woman has a version, right, of mother issues, so to speak. And the more we can work on that, even if our mother has already passed, we can still heal that part of ourselves as a little girl who's looking to be mothered and nurtured and cared for, and perhaps didn't receive it, the amount that we felt like we needed or deserved. But we can do that for ourselves as adults. And that is so beautiful before entering pregnancy, or even doing it while you're pregnant, in preparation for birthing and becoming a mother. So these relationships are real. And there's some even cool genealogy type things out there I've done that have worked on, healing the lineage of women. My grandmother, my great grandmother, and essentially they've had really rough lives too, when I look back. And I'm grateful for the sacrifices and the trials that they experienced, because I think it allows me to be where I'm at. You know what I mean? Because of the women who've come before us. Right. So there's a lot of gratitude to that.
I love that so much. And really this conversation around our mothers and our fathers and how it has us relating to the masculine and feminine is really pertinent. It has to be done to begin to feel like we're embodied in ourselves, like we've called all parts of ourselves back and now we can show up whole.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, Melisa, we have to wrap up this podcast. It's been so much fun. Do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
I think what I would share is this piece that's just been on my heart a lot lately as I've been speaking with women lately, is the parts of yourself that you have felt like you've had to shove down or hide, or they're not welcome. And particularly in this case, as a wife, as a mother, those parts of yourself that you've thought, well, those parts have to die. Those parts cannot come forward and be a part of my life, of my relationships. To dig a little deeper and get curious, because what's on the other side of those is likely your greatest strengths, the parts about you that make you magic. And so, never feel like there's parts of yourself you have to hide, and especially not from yourself. That if we can bring those parts forward and look at them with compassion and seeking deeper understanding, we will find a greater sense of our own power.
Yeah. Yeah. All parts of us are important, and even the ones that are dark and are feel shameful are the ones that most need to come up to the light and be acknowledged. Right. So I think that's really important to not really, I guess that's because you can't be fully authentic if you've pushed those parts down. It goes back to the numbing. Right. So we need it all. It's all there for a reason. Well, Melisa, thank you so much for coming on and sharing wisdom about a topic I think that is not discussed enough in our culture. And I'm really excited to put it out there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Laura.
Wow, what an impactful interview this was. Melisa and I went deep quick, and we're both talking after the interview how it's fascinating that we had met for the first time and were able to be in tears over the connection and the intimacy that her and I shared from this interview, which I think speaks volumes with her ability as a coach. So if you're interested in learning more, you can go to her website. It's Melisa, Melisa, Keenan, Keenan.com for more information on helping with coaching, helping with the dynamic within your intimate relationship, understanding the balance of masculine and feminine, and really how creation can come from all of that, especially when you're getting love and support from your intimate partner. So I hope you found this helpful.